Now, once you've selected your jury and you've instructed them about the nature of evidence, it really is time to get into the case proper, right? To actually present the case to the people who are sitting in the box. This is also true for those of us who are talking to our family or friends at a holiday, at a dinner, or whatever. We have to now, at some point, start. And you'll notice that in every trial, it starts with an opening statement. So I want to give you another principle, a forensic faith principle 3. You have to make an opening statement with great enthusiasm. If they don't think you believe it, then why would they believe it? And so every attorney I've worked with over the years who's learned to do this has been exceptional at making the case with great enthusiasm. Let me give you a few principles. I've talked about 5 of these in the book, but I want to just hit a couple of highlights here that I think will be important for you to draw away, okay? The first thing I want to tell you is this. You get better at doing something the more you do it. No kidding, right? And that's why it's hard for us the first weekend we go out and try to share the gospel. If we were on a street evangelism team, for example. Have you remember that first day, how nervous you felt? By the time you've done it 3 or 4 times, you really feel more confident. Practicing what you do is important. The idea of even talking about a forensic faith is so we will actually express a forensic faith and do it regularly. The more you do it. I can tell you that people will say to me sometimes, Jim, how in the world did you have that answer so quickly? Well, because I'll be honest, I've rehearsed that in my head about 1,000 times before I ever spoke it. And I'm the kind of person who constantly is rehearsing the conversation in my head. So by the time I actually have the real conversation, it's the 15th or 16th time I've had that conversation because I've been rehearsing it in my head. Because I'm so interested in the issues that I'm willing to think about the issues. If all we do is become so passionate and enthusiastic about what we believe, that we are willing to study and prepare, and being eager and prepared is key. You see this all the time. I work with a lot of students. I think you could be any age and work with students as long as they know that you're passionate about what it is you're teaching. It's easier to listen to someone who's making a case once I know that they are passionate, and so passionate that they've done their homework. That's important to me. And as a jury, if that attorney who's making a case doesn't appear to be eager, doesn't appear to even believe what he's saying, and doesn't appear to have done much homework to prepare, then you get a very short attention span from your jury if that's the case. It's important for us to do that. One more critical thing, I think, here that sometimes gets overlooked. We've learned in juries that if you make a good opening statement and you just cover all of it as thoroughly as you can, what you're really doing with the jury is making a series of promises. You're going to see this piece of evidence. You're going to see that piece of evidence. You're going to hear from this person. You're going to hear from that person. At the end of it, I really think our jurors are, for the most part, convinced this guy's probably guilty. All we have to do now as a team is make good on our promises. We promised we'd show you all that stuff, and now we're going to do it over the next 4 weeks. Making good on your promises is an incredibly important part of making an opening statement with enthusiasm. And as Christians, the same thing is true for us. Look, if I don't know the answer to something, I'm not going to make a promise I can't deliver. I'm not going to say something that later on you're going to discover is untrue because I just spoke it too quickly. I didn't research it well enough. I basically now made you a promise I can't deliver. So if you've got a situation where someone asks you a question and you think to yourself, I'm not sure how to answer that, here's your answer. I'm not sure how to answer that, but let me get back to you. I'll find out, and I'll give you as good an answer as I can give you. I try not to make promises I can't deliver. That's all part of making the case enthusiastically. In advance, that's the first step you have to take, is to be prepared enough to know your case well enough to make it enthusiastic. Here's principle number 4, though. Once you do an opening statement, there's another part of this trial process, right, in front of jurors, and that's called the evidence presentation. That's where you take the time to actually trot out all the evidence that you described in the opening statement. There's something about that there's some principles that I've learned in doing this that I think have been helpful. I've seen juries kind of turn off during that period of time because it could be a long period of time. So what do you do to keep your jurors engaged? Well, I can tell you this. We try to make everything incredibly accessible. That's so important, right? Technical information, DNA information, forensic information, certain types of analysis can be very confusing to a juror. Do you really think that sometimes as a Christian, when we're expressing what we believe, and we use expressions which we understand, I know what someone means when they say they were washed in the blood. But my friends who had never even heard this terminology might be scratching their heads. I get that. It's not accessible to them. I want to make sure that when I pitch what I'm pitching it in a way that they can catch it. So it's really important for me to take a look at the words I'm using. And am I using words that are accessible? Or am I so steeped in my Christian language that now I'm so far removed from the people I'm talking to, they don't understand me anymore? One more important point here. I sometimes think that when we show evidence, that it's really about, I want to show you this, I want to show you that. Now, they may have questions, but no, hang on. I'm going to show you more. I'm going to show you more. No. Hold on a second. As Christians, we have to be good questioners. When we actually present evidence on the stand, some of that evidence is eyewitness testimony in which a prosecutor and a defense attorney are asking questions of the witness. We have a chance to interview, to ask questions, to clarify things. The people you're talking to about Christianity, it's tempting just to kind of steamroll everyone with 50 pieces of evidence. That probably won't get it done. Instead, I want to be a good listener. It's hard for me, okay? I'll be honest with you. Some people it's easier for. I have to actually take a breath because sometimes I'm offering them evidence of things they don't even have a question about. I'm just used to offering all this evidence. Let's ask good questions. Let's listen to the answers before we get involved making a case. That evidence presentation part of our presentation needs to be, number one, accessible, and number two, we need to know what it is we're responding to. You won't know that if you don't ask good questions and wait to get the response. Now, we've talked about making an opening statement. We've talked about making an evidence presentation. Now we're at that part of the trial called the closing argument. You notice it's not called a closing statement. It's called a closing argument. Why? Because this is the place where we try to connect dots, to make the argument sound, not to be argumentative, to make a good presentation that connects all the dots from a reasoning perspective. You have to make your closing argument persuasively. Really, arguments are about persuasion. Statements are about data. Arguments are about persuading. So in the end, I want to persuade. I want to close my case with great confidence. And that's an area I just want to camp on for a second. You got to have confidence when you close this. And it's hard to have confidence if you don't know your case well. That's why we have to shift our thinking and become more forensic in our faith so we can know our case well. Also, I take time to summarize, as you'll see here, a case visually. You might think, well, Jim, I don't have art skills. I can't make a visual case. Oh, yes, you can. I've given you an illustration, for example, of a napkin drawing. Just a stickman drawing making the same robust evidential case that I made in the larger, more elaborate drawing. You don't have to make a good drawing to make a persuasive drawing. It can be a much less substantive drawing, as you see here. Very simple drawing. Anyone can make this drawing. And as you put it together and show the relationships between the evidence and the most reasonable inference, it's clear the drawing does all the talking. I've also given you many other examples you'll see in both Forensic Faith and my other books in which you see these kinds of drawings and how persuasive they can be. When you're making the case persuasive, when you're closing your argument with confidence, sometimes doing it visually takes you a lot further than just using your words. I can't tell you how many times we've been at the end of a process of trial and we've handed the case to the jury and we've wondered, will they come back with the verdict we're hoping for? But we've learned to give the case to the jury with confidence. Once you can't dwell on that. You do your job and then it's up to them to do their job. The same thing can be said actually when we share what we believe about Jesus with our friends, right? It's tempting to see the entire endeavor like a game of tennis, right? We're on one side of the net, the person we're trying to reach is on the other side. If we make any mistake in this game, it's all on us. We're the reason why we fail. But that's not what evangelism is all about. It's really not an individual sport. It's a team sport. Because people come to faith over a period of time listening to lots of voices, lots of people in their lives who either a role play, they demonstrate the love of Christ in their lives, or they speak the gospel to them. And at some point, people make a decision. And you don't know where you are in that process as somebody who's sharing your faith. In other words, you get up to the bat as a baseball player, and you think to yourself, gosh, my goal is to hit the ball out of the park. Well, maybe. If out of the park means that the person you're talking to is going to become a Christian right there in front of you, well, that would be great, wouldn't it? But that's not really the job of every baseball player. We are a team. You might get up there and hit a single or a double to move the runners around the bases. And you don't know where the person you're trying to reach is on those bases. For all you know, they've never even entered the field. But they might have entered the field and started thinking about Christianity, and now they're on third base. And they just need somebody to drive them home. It won't take a home run to do it. It'll take something smaller. This helps me as I process my role in this, right? My job is to get up and to stand at the plate and to look at what's pitched to me and do what I have to do. Make contact with the ball. Where the person is on the base path is what God does with each of us, moving us around the base path. Our job is to make contact with the ball. And that helps me because I'm not quite as arrogant or proud of myself if I have a conversation with somebody and they say, I'm ready to accept Jesus. Well, that's not all me. That's the people who preceded me for years who moved that player to the third base. And if I get up and I seem to make no progress at all, well, it's not going to be all me. I just make one piece of this puzzle. I move that person to first or to second. Somebody later on might drive that person home. So it helps me to kind of control the extremes here. I understand my role in how I evangelize people along the base paths. It is a team sport. And it's important for us to get in the game right now. As a cop, I have a tendency to see the entire world the way most cops see the world. We divide people kind of between the sheep and the wolves. Our job is to protect the sheep from the wolves. This is our role in this yard. We protect sheep from wolves. And Jesus describes us as believers as sheep. And as I look at the Christians I know, sometimes I feel like I get it. We are all sheep, right? We all need our master. We all need the shepherd. But sometimes I think to myself, do sheep even have the smarts to know they're being picked off at night by the wolves? I don't think they do. There's another animal in the yard, a sheepdog, that stands in the gap between the sheep and the wolves. The job of the sheepdog is simply to protect the sheep from the wolves. That's what their duty is. That's their job. As a matter of fact, all the sheepdog ministries around the country are, for the most part, cop ministries. They are ministries to people who see our role as sheepdogs in the yard. Now, whatever you may think of sheepdogs, one thing is certain. If the yard was full of sheepdogs, there wouldn't be a wolf problem. We have a wolf problem because we have all sheep and no sheepdogs. Well, we have some, of course, but not enough to do the job. But what if, by taking on our duty, by training, by learning to investigate the case, by learning how to communicate the case, we could transition from sheep to sheepdog? Wouldn't we be a blessing to our local congregations? Wouldn't we be a blessing to our own family? Wouldn't we make a difference in culture if we could become sheepdogs rather than sheep? That's why we take these steps. That's why we accept our duty. And that's why we try to live and breathe a forensic faith.